Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Basement Bible Breakdown. I'm your host, Stephen Whitsitt. I have no sidekicks, and I'm not the president of any kind of research institute. Just a simple Bible scholar and theologian with my whole heart given to Christ over for apologetics and answering the preterist paradigm from the futurist perspective. Not a partial preterist, and I'm not a dispensationalist. And I've got that in my other videos. I explain exactly my position. So, in a sense, I am quite different than most people who even deal with or talk to or even mess with preterists. And the main reason that I did attack it, you don't learn your enemy's position by talking with other dispensationalists who don't believe it. And so the office often will misrepresent what preterists actually do teach. And I find that quite common, that they really don't present it very well. Hitchcock and the others even have issues with some things that they don't quite deal with correctly. But in this video here, I'm taking a different direction. And from my last two videos, I'm still wearing the same t-shirt, of course. But I am answering back on Jason DeCosta's last video on his I.O. thing, and where he put the nail in the coffin. And I thought that was quite hilarious. And I'm still laughing now, because I was going to title this little video here, "I'm famous now, yay, Jason talked about me." And what he said in the video was, don't believe the futurist things, especially from the quote-unquote, from the laughable Stephen Witz at MDiv, or more commonly known as "you're the biggest dipshit in all of Facebook theology discussion with a sorry ass." Unquote. Sorry for the language, but that is exactly what he posted. And yes, to those Christians who understand what he is saying there by using that kind of language, is that he is not saved. I don't, of course he denies it. He denies anybody can be saved after 78. He is not a Christian. He is not a Bible scholar. He's not a Bible theologian. Anything that he produces is absolutely garbage, because he has no spiritual understanding. It's in the same way I would reject most liberal Bible theologians who claim to be Bible theologians, but have never experienced the born-again experience. They don't have a faith in Christ. They look at the Bible as myths and legends and explain it that way. They are no more saved than anybody who accepts I.O. So let me state it right up from the obvious, what's up front. I am not the one who's denouncing Christ's love for me. And this grafted in, wannabe Israelite, as Michael Bradley and the others all say, loves the one who died for me with all of his heart, body, and soul, and is looking forward to his coming, where I will be transformed to be like his glorious 6'5" bodily form. And I have no problem stating that for the record. I am a proud futurist who has a relationship with Jesus Christ, who knows personally and has a personal relationship with Christ where he speaks to my heart. And I believe that and know that with all my heart. And of course, it's completely subjective. And I'm not going to sit there and prove and give anybody proof of why I'm correct, whether, why I speak in tongues. David Gates is never going to get that, because he'll never understand it. He's a cessationist and believes that all the gifts ceased to exist after 70 AD, and has all of his arguments. But they have been dealt with over the years. You can join the John MacArthur camp all you want to with the strange fire crap. But personally, I was on the phone yesterday with Jeremiah, and I'm so glad to see him growing up and learning and bringing it. I'm so proud of the fact that he left preterism, and it was great to be on the phone with him for about almost 2 hours yesterday. And one of the things I related to him was personal stories of where I've seen God deliver people and heal people and change people's lives. And to say that God does not do that today absolutely horrendous lies. Yes, there's a lot of fakery and chicanery out there, but that never takes away from the truth of what God is doing. All right, enough with the gooey stuff. I'm reading of course, for my notes here so I can keep myself on track. And this one's a little bit easier to do with. Now, Jason, he really thinks he can humiliate me theologically, but I'm just going to let him do them to himself here. He erroneously thinks and believes he has found the holy grail of the 7 or 8 passages that proves I.O. and puts the nail in the coffin against any futurists or anybody being able to come against him with a solid argument. And so, yeah, Jason DeCosta, I'm calling you out for the fakery that you are. So here, let me start, though, with thanking him for being right on one major point. Now, this is absolutely true. I will agree with it. And he stated, and he believes, that the coming of the Lord is the end, the last day, and the fullness of the days of the Gentile comes to an end. Now, in the beginning of his videos, he said, don't even bring this argument up with the futurists because they will agree with you. And exactly right. We will agree with you. The coming of the Lord is the end. That is the last day. So, what are we talking about when we say last days? Let's get this real clear. There was the last day of Jerusalem. It ended. Was it permanent? No. But that's a different discussion. But was that the last day back then? Yes, it was. Did the Christian age continue on? Yes. Will that Christian age eventually come to an end? Yes. That's what we believe is when Christ comes back, he ends the rule and reign of man on earth. He sets up his kingdom. He rules over the earth for the next 1,000 years. And then that leads to, with Satan being released and the armies attacking again, where God finally cuts it off and says, that's it. The fullness of the Gentiles has all come in. There's no more to come in. That's the end of it. Life on heaven and earth, birth, marriage, all of that ends. And it says in Revelation 20 that everybody stands before the Lord in judgment. Everybody who has ever lived, from the beginning to the end. And people don't even realize, like, he equates that, the list of people from the foundation of earth, you know, the first and the last, with their names are put in the book, in the Lamb's Book of Life. Well, common sense tells you that any book has a last page, and on the last page is the last name. You can't add names to a book that has already been completed. Nobody can be born and added to that. Otherwise, what you're saying is that God didn't know about those people. Whoops, he made a mistake. They're born again, so now we got to add them to the list. But Christ, and the Bible says that, what? He knew them before the foundation of the earth. The last and the first. So absolutely ridiculous to think that it does not come to an end. But of course, that would be a later discussion in other videos. But now, so we agree on that point. The coming of the Lord is the last day. The fullness of the days of the Gentile comes to an end. And all futurists believe that. Unfortunately, of course, he places this coming in 80-70. Otherwise, his conclusion is absolutely correct. Thank you for Jason for bringing that up. Now, the error and his foundation and his screw-up and everything else is his inability to know what a word means and how it's used in scriptures. And all the way through his diatribe, he assumes that Gentile means, quote-unquote, non-law observing Israelites. So to begin with, let's have a Greek dictionary lesson for Jason. Gentile is a Latin word used in English translations to differentiate a nation that is not of the same race as Jews, meaning Gentiles are never Israelites. Look up in any Bible dictionary and you will see this is true. Gentiles then replace several common Greek words and is listed below. And I'm posting this thing up there so it'll be along with my video, so you will see both of them side by side what I'm saying. These Greek words are listed below from the Thayers and the Strongs and their usage and meaning. The first time, Gentiles is translated from the Greek word ethnos, which means a race, a nation, or the nations. And it says specifically when it's used in that context, ethnos, nations, translated as Gentiles by many translators, it means any nation that is distinct from Israel. Jews, descendants of Abraham, that all means the same thing. They were all 10 lost tribes, 12 tribes, it doesn't matter. If they descended from Abraham, they are distinct, they are for Israel. All other ethnos, races, nations, people groups, and everything that are not descendant of Israel are considered and called Gentiles. That's why the English translators use the word Gentile from the Latin, ethnos, to mean all other people. It was a deliberate thing to use a Latin word instead of an English word, nation, to indicate these different nations or races. The second word that is translated in English technically for us is from Gentiles is also the Greek word Hellen. Now, a Hellenist is somebody who is a Greek. It's usually a name for a Gentile. That's what the dictionary says. That's what Strong says. It's a term wide enough to include all Greek-speaking, i.e. educated, non-Jews. That's the definition. I'm sorry, you can't, I don't care where you go. The definition always is a Gentile is a non-Jew. Hellenists are being called Greeks because they are non-Jews. Timothy in Acts, what does Paul say? That he had to have Timothy circumcised because what? He was a Greek. His father was a Greek, his mother was a Jew. Why bring up this distinction if they were both Jews? There's no reason for it. But see, Jason wants you to believe is that actually his father was a Hellenized Jew who no longer follows the law and doesn't observe the law. But he used to be an Israelite, but he isn't anymore. He's so Hellenized, he's considered a Greek and has nothing left of him in the Old Covenant. He's probably he's not even circumcised. Of course, he won't be circumcised because he's the uncircumcised. So he's the heathen and everything else who has forsaken the covenant. And then his wife, who has raised Timothy up in the way of the book, a good Jewish woman, married this bad Jewish man. Do you see the problem there in that scenario that he wants to build up? It doesn't work. The other specific word that is also used is Gentile in some translations. Go to Acts 10:28. He uses the word actually there in some places called other nations, alafulus, of another race. Lafulus. Yep. Definition: it means a foreigner of another tribe or race. Refers to people who are not descendants of Abraham. This is in the Strongs and the Greeks. Look it up. They are not descendants of Abraham. So anybody who is not a descendant of Abraham is called an other nation. And that's what Peter says. Now I understand that God will accept people of other nations. He no longer calls them uncircumcised. He no longer calls them unclean. He calls them now clean. And that this gospel has come to them as well. That's the whole point of Acts 10. That's everything that he denies. The third thing that we've got to put out here and make very clear, from the Greeks, Thayers and Strongs, the word eklektos, which is translated elect. The chosen out ones, selected, sometimes as a substitute of those chosen out by God for the rendering of special service to them. So anybody that is chosen by God, like Mary, she was the elect of God because she was chosen of all among all women to be the father or the mother, not the father, the mother of Jesus Christ. So she was selected and called out from all women to be that. So she is the elect. Now, it goes on to say, and that's way special service to it. It also goes on to mean and say of the Hebrew race, particularly Hebrews, the Messiah and the Christians. Two different groups are called out and being called the elect. The Jews were a nation. Abraham was called out from all the nations to be a special nation. So therefore, those are the called out ones. The Jews are also called elect. Now, from all the Gentile nations, people are being called out of those nations to be a special people, to become the body of Christ. They, in that other sense, is also called the elect. So you have the elect Jews and you have the elect Christians. Paul uses both meanings all the way through, and that is another thing that Jason has no concept of when he gives us these 6 scriptures and tries to tell us this is the nail of the coffin. Because theologically, he construes the two of them up and is not able to separate the two of them. Now, I'll go on. He also conflates the idea that I think that there is one end, but there are actually 2 ends. And I think I've said this before. Of course, the first end was of the Jewish Jerusalem and the sacrificial system. from Matthew 24:13 is the verse that he uses. And we know that the world continues and does not end, of course. So what end is Matthew 24:13 talking about? The Olivet. It is talking about the end of the Jewish system. That's the end. Okay? Now, as I said before, in the future perspective, man's ruling on earth when Christ returns, and the nations. When Christ returns, he rules over the nations. This is what we're talking about in Revelation 11:25. This is the end. The fullness of the end, Gentiles is complete. When that end comes, all of Israel will be saved when they see the Messiah return and recognize he is the same person they rejected 2,000 years ago. This is the last day also of John 6:36. On the last day, there is a resurrection that happens at his coming. That is why Jason is able to point the finger back at Don Preston, because they say that's the end of the Gentiles. No, if Gentiles continue to come in, then that has not happened yet. The fullness of that has not ended yet. The full time of the Gentiles has not ended. If we are still being saved, that fullness has not come, because what happens is, at the fullness of time, when he returns, Israel is grafted back in from Romans 11. The Israelites are grafted back. He will show them mercy again. They kicked him out. They'll bring him in just the same way that he brought us Jews in. That is the whole point of Revelation 11. Now, getting to his argument. The full number of converts, Gentiles, did not come in if the story continues today. That's what he's saying. So that's true. That is one reason why we prove the second coming did not happen in AD 70. Otherwise, the full number came in, and no one can be saved after that. Now, so as I said before in my other videos, all demonic doctrines always have a sliver of truth. And that is where Jason has that sliver of truth in his doctrine of I.O., which is a myth, a doctrine from the pit of hell. So where did he go wrong? Well, let's go back to Revelation 7. He said the elect are sealed. And he tries to argue that the 144,000 and those of the other nations and everything, of the Gentiles, of the people that came out, who were actually non-law abiding Israelites that were scattered among the nations, and they're the ones that are being called out. And so actually they're, and he conflates again the idea, you have two groups. Israelites, Jews who are circumcised, and Israelites who are uncircumcised. So now he's got two groups again. He's made them as one. Do you see that? There's a contradiction there. So as we demonstrate from scholars, the elect refers to both Christians and to Jews. Gentiles are never Israelites. Now, he goes back to elect of 1 Peter 1 and saying these Christians who were dispersed, since they were in context of 1 Peter, we have got to look at that thing. 1 Peter says what? He says to the dispersed. He doesn't say the lost 10 tribes. He doesn't say Jews or anything else. See, in James, he begins what? To the lost. He didn't even say lost. He says to the 12 tribes. Well, are the 12 tribes lost? Are there 10 tribes that are lost? No. He specifically says to the 12 tribes, so he knows that there are 12 tribes. These guys are dispersed from Acts 8. If you look at when the persecution came on the church in Acts by Saul, who became Paul, those Christians dispersed all over the place. All over the place. But see, because Jason thinks the elect are all the same people, but the definition shows you the word elect is used of both groups of Jews and Christians, that makes it wrong. Gentiles who are Hellenists or other nations are ones who are never given the law. Romans 2:14, for when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. Any Israelite, any descendant of Israel was given the law, whether they were observed or not. And what does he say? What did Jason say? Non-law abiding. That means those Gentiles he is claiming were given the law, but they are not abiding to it. Do you see that contradiction? He doesn't catch that. He doesn't think. He doesn't have the ability to think through that. He'll still deny what I'm saying right now and argue it, and mostly he'll just come back and call me a bunch of foul names, more than likely. So the uncircumcision, that is what Paul commonly uses, always referred to non-Jews of other nations who were never given the law. See, Ephesians 2:11, therefore remember that one time you Gentiles in the flesh called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, which was made in the flesh by hands. See, here he's making that distinction in Ephesians 2. The circumcision, the Jews always called the other people who of their nations, he called them, you're uncircumcised. See, you're the heathen. You're uncircumcised. You're not part of the covenant. Well, again, Jason said, all non-law abiding Israelites, they were still given the law, they're just not abiding to it. Do you see how he trapped himself into it? Let me go on, if I can do this a little bit more briefly, because we're running out of time. Okay, I can't stress the mess of my notes there. I'll put them all up there. You'll be able to see them. But what it comes down to in the basic bottom line is that Jason denies Gentiles. So when you have a word that's been used for 2,000 years to understand people that are not Gentiles, all of a sudden he wants to change that definition. That is the premier sign of a cult, of people who are walking in false theology. They change the meaning of words. They think they can change the meaning of words. They think they're redefining it. They think they're defining it from scriptures, and they're not. And simply, I have already, that's been proven right there. Not only from that, but from also that, from scriptures. Non-law abiding Israelites. He proves his own case. Gentiles are people who are not law abiding people whatsoever. Okay, got a visitor. All right, thanks for showing. Thanks for popping in, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of heat from this from Jason. We'll come back, and he can deal with me in his own video. Thanks.